In these caves, you see the transition from just surviving to living, to observing the world, to enjoying it. People coming together to make art.
While exploring caves in the region of Charama, which are known to contain prehistoric artwork dating as far back as 10,000 years.
Cave art is irresistible. There's something immediate about it, like the past reaching out through stone. Some paintings are graceful, almost cinematic. Others are strange, not just beauty rendered in charcoal and ochre, but fear, memory, and maybe even myth. Bit by bit, it becomes evident these weren't just images. They were messages, warnings perhaps, or stories passed down without words, because not all cave art is about the hunt. Some of it shows us the hunted. Today we're digging into the oldest art on Earth and what it might reveal about the violence of the world that made us. Shadows on stone. Long before the bison of Lascaux or the horses of Chauvet, there was a cave near the southern tip of Africa. Inside Blombos Cave, archaeologists uncovered something quietly revolutionary. Pieces of ochre etched with crosshatch designs dating back over 70,000 years. These weren't just idle scratches. Alongside them were shell beads likely worn as necklaces, bone tools used to mix pigments, and abalone shells that served as early paint containers, prehistoric palettes left behind by people thinking in symbols. This was not survival alone. This was communication, expression, the birth of abstraction. But here's where the story begins to shift. In the caves of La Pasiega, Ardales, and Maltravieso in Spain, researchers found red lines and dots painted more than 64,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens ever set foot in Europe. These marks were likely made by Neanderthals. For decades, we thought symbolic thought was uniquely ours, that only we told stories in pigment and firelight. But now it seems that spark existed across species, flickering separately, or maybe passed along in moments we'll never see. As it spread, the world began to glow with marks on limestone, basalt, and sandstone walls. In Indonesia's Sulawesi caves, around 45,000 years ago, someone painted wild pigs in stenciled hands. On the island of Borneo, early humans outlined the massive shapes of wild cattle. In Australia's Kimberley region, rock art stretches back 40,000 years. Wherever you go, one subject dominates: animals, herds of them, charging, grazing, locked in motion. And yet, strangely, for tens of thousands of years, the artists left themselves out. The world behind the walls. It's a mystery that sits quietly in the shadows of every cave wall. Why did these artists, so capable of rendering lions mid-pounce and bison in lifelike motion, almost never paint themselves? We are visual creatures. Even toddlers, with no formal training, draw stick figures before they can form full sentences. So why the absence of human beings? And when humans do appear, they're not heroic, they're not central. They're often stylized, reduced to simple shapes, bent, broken, bleeding. Sometimes they're lying face down. Sometimes they're full of spears. This runs against a long-standing myth in anthropology, the so-called noble savage. The idea that early humans lived in peaceful harmony with nature and each other, untouched by the corruption of modern life. You can feel why that myth persists when you look at Ice Age cave scenes. The animals are beautiful. The scenes seem serene, idyllic. Cultures like the Aurignacian, Gravettian, and Magdalenian left behind work that stuns with its detail and motion. Herds of horses gallop across the limestone. Lions lounge together in groups. There's a powerful aesthetic at play, one that invites a kind of prehistoric nostalgia. But if you look closer, long enough, the illusion starts to crack. In the cave of Pech Merle, past the famous spotted horses, there's a human figure lying prone. The body is pierced, 5 to 10 spear-like shapes driven through the torso and limbs. Not far from it, a symmetrical symbol, interpreted by some as a bird, by others as a clan mark, stands like a silent witness, or maybe a threat. Arms stretched wide, legs planted, posture rigid, defiant. It brings to mind footage from North Sentinel Island, where isolated islanders, when approached, didn't run. They spread their limbs and raised their weapons. Maybe this cave symbol is the same kind of warning. This is what happens when you cross the line. Marks of murder. Not far from Pech Merle lies another cave system, Cunyac, where the scenes grow even more unsettling. Amid images of deer and ibex, two human figures emerge, both seemingly caught in moments of agony. One appears to be fleeing, tucked inside the silhouette of a giant cervid, probably a megaloceros. The other is unmistakable. Arms and legs outstretched, the body riddled with spears. The wounds are not random, they are methodical. Limbs, torso, sides, all struck with deliberate force. This wasn't an accident frozen in time. It was a message, etched in pain. But what kind of world produced this art? Was this a memory of a real event, an execution, a warning? At the height of the Upper Paleolithic, around 37,000 years ago, Europe may have had fewer than 4,000 Homo sapiens. That's less than the population of a small town spread across an entire continent. Most lived in small bands of 15 to 30 people, more than half of them children. Large-scale warfare was unlikely, but personal violence, very much within reach. Anthropologists often study modern mobile forager societies to understand the deep past. A comparative study of 21 such groups found that 55% of homicides were one-on-one, emotional, personal, often erupting from jealousy, betrayal, or revenge. About 36% occurred within the same group, between kin or close friends. Only 15% involved outsiders, and even those were rarely about land or territory. They were usually about status, shame, or stolen partners. Even more telling, these killings were rarely impulsive. They were planned, remembered, and retold, woven into the fabric of a group's collective memory. If violence in the Paleolithic was rare, it was never meaningless, and some of it was carved into stone. When humans aren't the killers. Not all cave scenes center on humans as the aggressors. In some, they are the ones caught in the moment of failure, wounded, overwhelmed, or transformed. Nowhere is this more vivid than deep within the Lascaux cave complex, in a chamber known as the shaft scene. Unlike the sweeping panels of galloping animals elsewhere in the cave, this one tells a very different kind of story. A massive bison dominates the wall, its stomach torn open, entrails spilling out in anatomical detail. In front of it lies a human figure, limbs outstretched, head rendered like a bird's. Some think it's a man in a mask. Others think it's a symbolic transformation, maybe a shaman in a trance. Nearby, a staff topped with a bird stands upright, almost like a spiritual totem or a spear thrower. Interpretations vary wildly. Was this a hunting failure, where the wounded bison turned and gored its attacker? Or was it a spiritual journey, an imagined space where human and animal blur, merging identity and meaning? We may never know, but it's not the only moment like this. At Rocco-Sorcier, a sculpted frieze shows a man mid-flee from a charging animal, arms raised, body recoiling, caught in the split second before impact, or just after a narrow escape. There's even a trace of humor in the pose, a kind of prehistoric irony frozen in stone. At Gabaloo Cave, another figure appears, a strange hybrid of human and bison, twisted in posture, lines etched like wounds. Whether spirit, shaman, or something in between, the pain is there. Sometimes these images feel like memory, other times they feel like a myth. The Sulawesi Revelation. In 2019, deep within a cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, researchers made a discovery that quietly rewrote the timeline of human imagination. Painted roughly 44,000 years ago, the scene showed a group of small figures surrounding animals, wild pigs and dwarf buffalo. But these weren't ordinary humans. Some had tails, others had snouts. All were hybrid beings, part human, part animal, engaged in what appeared to be a coordinated hunt. They were therianthropes, shapeshifters of the prehistoric mind. This was more than just a hunting scene. It was the oldest known example of storytelling in human history. Before this discovery, many believed complex myth-making began in Europe, perhaps with the famous bird-headed figure of Lascaux. But the Sulawesi scene is thousands of years older, and it's not an isolated image, it's a narrative. Multiple figures acting with shared intent, blending the human and non-human in a symbolic world beyond pure survival. That changes things. Because if early humans in Southeast Asia were telling symbolic stories with imagined creatures, then the capacity for myth, complete with archetypes, heroes, and rules, was already well developed long before written language or cities, and it may have been universal. The bird-headed man at Lascaux, the horned shaman at Gabilot, the crouching figure fleeing at Rocco-Sorcier. These weren't accidents of imagination. They were part of a pattern, a shared human impulse to turn danger into meaning. It suggests that Ice Age artists weren't just recording what they saw, they were shaping what they believed, interpreting the unknown. The further we follow these images into the past, the more they seem to blur the line between reality and belief. Some anthropologists think the figures pierced with spears were actual people, traitors, enemies, or victims of taboo violations. Others believe they were mythic archetypes, symbols of punishment, fate, or transformation, woven into oral traditions we'll never hear. In many cultures, the cave was more than shelter. It was a sacred space, a place between worlds. Some theories suggest these paintings were part of initiation rites, shamanic visions, or ceremonies to honor the spirits of animals. The act of painting by torchlight, deep underground, may have been as important as the image itself. Whatever their purpose, the detail and care in these works tell us they mattered, not just as art, but as belief. Even now, standing before them, we feel it, that strange mix of reverence and fear, a kind of quiet understanding, passed through time without words. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the tribe. So, hit subscribe, drop a comment with the cave art that stuck with you most, or whether you think these scenes were myth, memory, or something else entirely. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.